Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just going to wait as a few more friends connect. While we're waiting for everyone to connect, one of the things we love to do at the Carl is ask what your favorite picture book is. It might be one from childhood. It might be one that you've recently read, but this is a great way. We're all kind of connected by our love of picture books, so we would love to hear maybe a favorite picture book from childhood or something that you've read recently. Please share in the chat. We'd love to see what those titles are.
Who would like to start? I'll start.
Go for it, Ruth. Yeah.
So one of my favorite books growing up, I had a little golden book of, Hopalong Cassidy, of all things. I just wore that thing out. It just, I mean, I was born loving horses, so anything that had a horse in it, I was on it. So that was my favorite book growing up for quite a few years. And then I graduated to the Black Stallion series when I started being able to read. But yeah.
Well, I think we'll probably ask you more about that too, Ruth. Love to dive into those favorite horse books.
Well, I'll share. I mean, I don't really have a favorite picture book from childhood, but I always loved horses and just spent years reading nonfiction horse books, any nonfiction book that I could get. And I still have a lot of them from childhood. And I think that's sort of tied into my love of history and combining horses in history. So yeah, just thumbing through the different breeds and what horses could do. It's still, it still intrigues me. So.
Gosh, I did read books as a kid. It's funny, the Black Stallion, the movie, just was such an inspirational thing for me. And I think I love the opening first, I don't know if it's 45 minutes, but where there's no dialogue and it's just the connection between the horse and the boy. And to me, that's what is the essence of a horse relationship. And so that just gets me every time. I watch the credits and I cry at that one. It's so beautiful.
Well, thank you. And for any of our guests joining us, feel free to share a favorite picture book in the chat. And it could be horse related or not, but we love to see them. So I think we'll get started. Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Waring and I'm the Director of Education at the Carl. And thank you for joining us for our virtual program, Horse Tales, a Conversation. A few updates as we get started. First, we'd love to hear from you. So as I said, feel free to use that chat, to say hi, tell us where you're connecting from. In addition to the chat button, we also have the Q&A button. We want to use that. We'll have questions for Gianna and Jennifer and Ruth. So as you have questions, whether it's at the end of this program or if it's during this program, feel free to use that Q&A button. I'll be checking it frequently and we'll have time dedicated at the end to look at those questions. If for any reason we have technical difficulties, hopefully that's not an issue, and we get cut off, we'll try to get back online as soon as possible, and you can use the link shared in your Zoom reminder to reconnect. And now on to our program. Just a quick background on our guests. Oh, thank you, Krishna. Artists, Gianna Marino, Ruth Sanderson, and Jennifer Thermes are here today to share their love of horses and discuss their work in the Carl's current exhibition, Horse Tales, Galloping into Children's Books. This exhibition, which runs through December 31st, so it just opened for a couple more weeks, hopefully you can see it, showcases both classic and contemporary picture books exploring the ways horses have captivated human hearts and artistic imaginations. It includes 80 drawings and paintings, collages, prints, and digital illustrations by 50 artists. Some background on our guests. Gianna Marino was born in San Francisco and spent her early years galloping horses through Golden State Park. She's written over a dozen award-winning books, including Meet Me at the Moon, Tall Houses, Night Animals, If I Had a Horse. We Will Live in This Forest Again. And she is the New York Times bestselling illustrator of Don't Let Them Disappear by Chelsea Clinton. Ruth Sanderson is the renowned illustrator and author of over 80 books for children. Her fairy tale retellings have been widely praised and much loved by children everywhere. She's also illustrated book covers, fantasy art, collector's plates, animation concept art, and product design. She teaches writing and illustrating for children in a summer graduate program at Hollins University. Jennifer Thermes is a map illustrator and the award-winning author and illustrator of many books for children. Jennifer weaves maps throughout her stories in order to give readers a sense of geography and place. She's fascinated by the big picture of history and how it connects the past with our lives today. She's connecting to us from New England. Tonight's program is going to be recorded, so if you miss any part or like to share with a friend, we should have it on the Carl's YouTube page in the next week or two. So we've already kind of dived into kind of our favorite picture books. We've asked you all to share a favorite picture book with us in the chat, and you just re-asking our guests here with that equine focus. Do you have a favorite horse book growing up? And you've mentioned some of them, Gianna, Ruth, and Jennifer. What about those books? You know, what did you like about them so much? Ruth, do you want to go back to that little golden book and talk to us a little bit more?
Oh gosh. I also really, really loved cowboys. I wanted to be a cowgirl when I grew up. And so Hopalong Cassidy, with the cowboy hat. I was just enamored. And that was during a time when I started begging my parents to buy me a horse. And finally, they relented when I was 13 and did buy me a horse, which I kept at my best friend's house. So it was sort of a dream come true. And at that point, that's when I graduated to the Black Stallion series, which I read every single book in the series, and was fortunate when I became a professional illustrator. One of my first jobs, the first couple of years that I started, I got to illustrate the Black Stallion book covers, the very first paperback editions of the Black Stallion, and I got to meet Walter Farley. So that was like a dream come true. So,
Gianna, how about you? Those books.
When I was saying I did read books as a kid, but I was so taken by the Black Stallion film, and I feel like I love the idea of picture books being almost cinematic, and I feel like our little swatches and sketches that we start with, which I know all of us are gonna show some later, but I feel like those are also so cinematic. So I was so drawn to that. But other non-horse books, believe it or not, I can't even think of some that I was just obsessed with in the horse books. I made a lot of my own stories. I had a lot of the little Breyer models, and I'd play with them and create these whole dramas and these scenes with these little horses. But book-wise, I was in love with Curious George, and I think because of his mischief and his just always getting in trouble, and I somehow related to that, even though I wasn't always getting in trouble. But I think in all of my stories, I kind of mixed that, like I would imagine him, what he would be like if he was in my little character stories with my horses. And so.
And Jennifer, any more to share about those horse books that you loved growing up?
Yeah, I think they were just a jumping off point for my imagination. Seeing horses from around the world. And I rode as a kid, but I never had my own horse. And I did beg my parents, of course, endlessly for a horse, but was able to take lessons. And, just diving into those books let me sort of fantasize about what it would be like to have a horse, and really sort of extend my imagination to their world, if that makes sense. And yeah, it was just a lot of daydreaming about horses while perusing those books.
Well, as we were, coming together for this virtual program, I was thinking about kind of our timing with this exhibition wrapping up, but also, just last month, it was the 60th anniversary of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. And many of us might know the story, but when he went to his publisher with the idea for this book, he originally wanted to call it Where the Wild Horses Are. And the publisher, loved that idea, but Maurice Sendak very quickly realized that he actually couldn't draw horses. So his publisher, wanted to know what he could draw, and Sendak said, "I could draw things, hence Where the Wild Things Are." And
Wow.
it just got me thinking, like Sendak, do you experience any challenges in illustrating horses? Or what is it that you like about illustrating horses?
Big questions. Well, I'll dive in if no one minds. And maybe you guys can relate to this too, but I know I've gone through phases where if I take a little time off, if I finish a project and I take some time off and I come back to it, and I'm actually working on another horse book right now. And I'd taken a few months off before I was working on these little sketches, and I absolutely positively could not draw a horse to save my life when I came back to it. And even though I see them every day, I have horses, and there's something about capturing both obviously the physical elements and the little details of how their legs bend and where their stifle comes into their hocks, into their fetlocks, but there's also so much movement in horses, and I think that's what I'm so drawn about drawing them, is they're so expressive. And so to capture that, I feel like personally I have to slip into the mind of something to capture that sort of movement and that physicality. And if I'm not in that mind, I can't even draw a stick figure. So that's my challenge.
Jennifer, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely if you haven't drawn for a while or drawn horses for a while, you can only be rusty. Although I think bicycles are harder to draw than horses. But yeah, again, just drawing their expressions and their shapes and sizes, and I look at my own work and I'm like, oh, it's not quite where I want it to be, but again, every artist has their own way of expressing themselves through their line and their color, and just the way they draw the characters of horses. So it's always a challenge, but it's fun. It's, if you love something, I think drawing something is the best way to love something. It's hard to explain. I kind of go into nonverbal mode when I'm drawing. So yeah.
So nonverbal, like just you become very focused.
You just become very focused, yeah. And it's hard to kind of find the words to talk about your process, but yeah, you kind of get lost in the drawings and lost in drawing the horses. Yeah, I don't know if that's making any sense at all, but
I think I see Ruth, nodding your head like, oh yes, I'm.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when you're writing and illustrating, I don't know if this happens with you all, but like you get into visual mode and you don't really have the words, and then you get into writing mode and you don't really think you remember how to draw, and so the challenge is to meld the two together, maybe.
Well said.
Yeah.
So I've been drawing horses since I could hold a pencil, because it was wish fulfillment. I wanted one, and I didn't stop when I got a horse. And my first oil painting was a portrait of a horse. I've basically been drawing and painting horses my entire life. So for 70, well, not quite 70 years, 60 something years. Yeah, so I've illustrated, I don't know, 20, 30 either horse books with interior illustrations or picture books. Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, I just keep drawing horses and painting horses. And a couple years ago, I decided, I've been doing this so long, and I grew up loving a book on how to draw horses by Walter Foster. And I decided, you know what? I could do a book on how to draw horses. So a couple years ago, I self-published one on Amazon, and it's doing great. So yeah, if anyone wants to learn how to draw horses, look me up.
Well, I know, so Ruth, you were when the Horse Tales exhibition opened this summer, you were participating in our family programs happening during the day. And You were sharing, just wonderful background information on your research and your sort of setup when you're illustrating horses. And so I think, and as I was sharing with all of you, our guests, whether they're on site at the Carl or virtual in these programs, love to learn about an artist's process, and kind of they like to feel like they're a fly on the wall and experiencing what you experience as you're working on a book. So can you take us through your process a bit? How do you prepare and research? Do you have a preferred medium, and why? For all of our guests joining us, we Gianna, Jennifer, and Ruth will all be kind of sharing screens and showing us a little bit more. Would one of you like to get us started and share a little bit?
You want to start, Gianna?
Sure. We're like the is it the little chipmunks that are like, no, you go first. So instead of sharing my screen, I'm actually going to show you, I'm going to hold things up because I think scale is really important here, and it wouldn't really relate with if I shared my screen. So this is some of the original little sketches from If I Had a Horse. You could see the size they are compared to my hands. And they're literally just like on two sides of this little notebook. And I had this idea. I was traveling in Costa Rica, and I was separated from my horse for a chunk of months. And there were some people that I saw riding, and I just really missed my horse and riding in that connection. And so I was working on another story about a tiger, and it just was not working. It was one of those, like, I draw some sketches and throw them away. And so I just started working on this little horse story. And anyway, these are the early sketches. And I love these kind of, just this looseness and this, I don't know, they just felt, I wanted to keep going with it. So from those, I started doing them a little bit tighter, but just in these silhouettes. And I think when I started working on it, I wasn't intending on doing them in silhouettes, but I loved just the simplicity of it. And so to take away every bit of detail, which, as you can see by some of the work behind me, and I love detail, and I can get so wrapped up in the eyelashes and the little tiny things. So I was having fun playing with this. And as I kept going, I thought, well, I'm going to really keep messing around. And I actually put the whole book together, and I proposed it to my publisher without words. And he sent me back an email, I think in an hour, and said, oh my God, this is so beautiful, but what does it have to say? And so these are little dummies. This is how I do all of my books. This is just these sketches tightened, scanned in, and I put them in a little program and just print them out and glue it together. But you could see this is without the words, obviously. But I always like to look at these early ways how a book starts and what it begins with. So I had this drawn out like this, and I thought I was done. I was like, this is it. And so from there, we kind of went back and forth, and I just went into a space of being a little kid again, and what I would feel like, to how I felt to want a horse, and just started writing. I think I wrote it it was one of those just really fast things. Anyway, once I got the words worked out, I then do these little tiny sketches. I just blew them up bigger, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to see what this looks like in its full size. If you guys can see this, okay. It's always upside down and backwards. So I put these guys together, and can I talk a little bit about, Courtney, is it appropriate to just talk a little bit more about how the art was done, or should I save that for later, moving on?
Oh, great. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Go ahead. Okay. So this was the most unusual book I've ever finished. And I only say that because I was in an artist residency I think I was there for a month. And I had the sketches done, and I was going to plan on just working on the paintings. And I didn't really know. I kind of messed around with some different ideas. And again, I kind of was going into adding some detail to it. So a little bit like some eyes or some stuff, but it wasn't working. And I was kind of frustrated with it. So I started just doing these. I was like, okay, what do I want to do with color here? So I started doing these, just taking two colors. And I'll show you some of these. And again, these are just little small swatches. But I would just take two colors, this purple and blue, and kind of mix them together and see what that felt like. And here's two different colors. And then I would start doing them sort of on top of each other in washes. And so I have a whole stack of these. So I just started messing with colors and tacking them on the wall where they felt they should be. I'll just show you, but they're all the same, but just different colors. And then the ones that I was sort of drawn to, I said, okay, well, I'm gonna just start messing with these. And from there, geez, sorry, I've got some piles of things over here. So from there I started, and this will be a little bit closer to what the book is, but not quite, but I started just getting a little bit more detailed, but not too detailed, and just thinking, where do I want to go with this? And so you could just see this process here. So I just started with these little guys. And then once I had sort of figured out, like, okay, I think I want to do this page in this kind of color and whatnot. And I thought, well, these are so simple. I'm going to do a color swatch for every page. And so I started doing these color swatches. And I sent these, and you can see how big these are, right? This is my hand here. I don't have giant hands. I sent this to my editor while I was still in this residency, and I sent him the whole thing, and he said, you're done. And I've never had this happen before. So these are the color swatches, the studies that we ended up blowing up to the full size of the book and using those. So this one was kind of a reject. It had some scribbles on it, but this is the size that the final art was. And I've never had that happen before. So
That's incredible.
yeah, it was kind of a neat thing. I was a little sad to be done with it because it was so fun to work on, and I've never had a book finish this quickly or simply in that way. So it was kind of a different thing.
And since it connects specifically to this story, Gianna, we have one of the guests in the chat is Ellen Kiter, our co-curator for this exhibition, and she's asking, when did you decide to add words?
Oh, thank you, Helen. Yeah, Ellen, sorry. So I really wanted it to be a wordless book. I've always loved wordless picture books, and just the imagination that it makes you have as the reader or the viewer. And my very first picture book I did was wordless, and it was so hard to read it to kids. So I always said, okay, never do that again, add some words into it. So this one, it was pretty early on. I had finished the sketches and I sent it to my editor, and he just said, wow, what if you were to add words to this, what would it look like? So it was still really early on. I think the drawings were done, as much as, they were so simple. And I went into that, I was saying that sort of childhood, feeling of what I felt like as a child to want a horse, and what I would do with this horse, and kind of the balance between the connection, but also the fear and the worry and the problems that come up, and the realization of this girl with this horse that, okay, I have to be brave, but you have to be gentle. And so I just started working with that kind of feeling with it. And then those words, they came pretty easily once I had that sort of voice of the child.
Thank you so much, Gianna. That's incredible. And really, I mean, going into the gallery and seeing that work for If I Had a Horse, it is incredible to see the scale of it and what you've achieved in that space. There's just such a gentleness and huge connection between that child and the horse, and you see that so incredibly in that one image. Ruth, you had a new picture book biography come out. Was it a year or so ago on Rosa Bonheur? When did that come out?
The Storm of Horses came out in 2022. So was that just last year? Just last year. So long ago. Yes. So.
And you've got some images to share with us. I mean, talking about your process and your research.
I do just a bit, yeah. This was a project that here, let me start it. I just have a few. Just wanted to talk about this piece is in the exhibit, so I thought I would talk about its the process of creating this. It's both an interior illustration and used for the cover, and I'm most proud of
I love that too.
of this how I set that horse right in the spine. So that was really tricky, and I was very relieved that it worked. But anyway, I painted this. It might be one of the biggest paintings in the show, and I painted it 24 by 36 inches because the main character is standing within the storm of horses. So I wanted the cover to really show her, this young artist who I think she was slightly under 30 when she started the process of this painting. And this was in 1850 or so. Rosa Bonheur, a woman artist, and she had to get a permit to dress like a man to go to the Paris Horse Fair so she could draw and paint horses for her own reference to create an 8 by 16-foot painting of horses. So this actually is her painting, which has been hanging at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I first saw it in art school close to 50 years ago, and fell in love with it. Yeah, and it is literally 16 and a half feet wide and huge. You can see me standing in the corner, next to the painting. And a few years ago, I think 2018 or so, I was at another art museum with some friends, and we were talking about picture book biographies, and that there were a lot of ones being done of artists. And I went, if I were ever to do a picture book biography, it would be for Rosa Bonheur, and how she created that magnificent painting of the horse fair. So that was the seed of the concept. And then I just started working on it and did 4 or 5, the typical number of manuscripts and revisions, and trying to simplify it as much as I could, getting down to the essence of what the story was about, just really focusing on this part of her life, her love of horses. And for research, I went to Paris, and south of Paris, about 1 hour south, there is Rosa Bonheur's estate is a museum that looks like she walked out yesterday. That is her artist smock hanging on that chair. Those are her riding boots. So that's her saddle. Her paintings are there. Not all of them, obviously, most of them were sold, after she died, but there are drawings. In fact, the family that's owns a museum now is cleaning out the attic and discovering all sorts of things up there. So it was really exciting to research her life. And the most exciting thing was in that museum, on a drawing board or easel, was this unfinished painting of horses she was working on when she died. And it really gave me the information to be able to deconstruct that painting, the horse fair, and show in a picture book how she did it. She drew it out with brown, just brown paint, oil paint, it's oils. And then she started finishing each section, leaving some of it loose. It's not how I would work, but when I did this painting, for instance, which is also in the exhibition at the Carl, I wanted to deconstruct. So I copied her horse fair, and then just drew the horses in line in oil, and then showed her starting the process. Another so research. I'd never done a biography, never done a lot of nonfiction, so I just immersed myself in trying to find reference, and obviously from 1850 there are not photos of that period. So I found this engraving from 1871 of the horse fair, and I thought, perfect, this is perfect reference. And so I did this sample illustration, figuring, well, this will be the cover and one of the interiors. So this was the original idea I had for the cover. And then I discovered online another picture of the horse fair, this, and I realized that other reference was incorrect. It was even though it was close to the time period, it was 20 years later. This is more from the actual period, and in you know, I looked really carefully in her painting, and you can tell that this is the stuff. This is where she was. So I used this, and then populated it with horses and reference, and my model in the corner there, standing and drawing. Actually, a young artist friend who was about the same age as Rosa, and was sort of the type. She's short, and I think Rosa was maybe 5 feet. And so that's how I created the reference for it. And I used some of her own drawings and some photos and some old paintings to sort of create reference to create the painting. And here's my sketch for that piece. I did decide to leave out the lamps in her illustration. The lamps are not there, and I'm wondering if she like made that editorial change, if they actually were there and she decided to leave them out in her painting too. So this is the under drawing on the board, and then here's my space where I created this, and you know, the 40 pieces of reference for just this one painting, which took me a month to do just this one painting. So I'm sort of the opposite of Gianna, in that, yeah, I'm not fast. I'm very jealous. I wish I could be faster. And so this is oil, and I work in layers. So here's like the first layer, and then part of the second layer, and there's the finished piece. And yeah, my little horse in the center. So one of the other pieces in the show is this book cover for the Horse Diaries series, which is a Random House series. And my daughter Whitney is now an author and wrote 5 of the stories, including this one in the series. So I always use real people, real horses, if I can. And this was a horse at the barn I was boarding our horses at, and then a friend and his young friend posed for the prospectors, and there's the original hanging in the museum, and the book cover. So that's my process. How do I stop the share? Okay.
Thank you. And Jennifer, wow, you have so many horses in your book, Horsepower, How Horses Change the World. It's just incredible. That came out, what, maybe 2 years ago. Can you share with us a little bit about your process? It's such an incredible book, story.
Sure. I'll let me see if I can share a few things. Yes, lots and lots of teeny tiny horses. And I think if you can see this now, this is a page of thumbnails, and I really like to start all of my books just doing little teeny tiny thumbnail sketches. And I like to tell kids that it's a great way to just be free and not make mistakes and just try out different views of things. And I like to compile them all together so that I can kind of see the entire book like a movie. And I know Gianna mentioned earlier, you know, the cinematic quality to picture books. And so I find that if I can see it all on one page, I can figure out, you know, what I need to show more of and where the action is. And so again, they're not very detailed at this point, but it gives me a big overview of the book itself. And I can also incorporate a lot of maps this way and figure out, you know, where I want those to go. And, you know, this book really came about. Somebody said once that your future books come from the books you're working on now. And my book, Manhattan, had a lot of horses in it. When I was doing research for that book, all of these old archival photographs had horses. And I realized that horses are really very rarely mentioned throughout history, but really all of human history, basically none of what we've accomplished could be done without horses in terms of transportation and, agriculture, communication, travel, wars, unfortunately. But so that was sort of the genesis of this book. And so, yeah, so these are thumbnails. And then what I'll do is do tons and tons of these, and eventually start refining the sketches. It didn't show up. That's funny. I can't see it online.
Yeah, I can see it. That's great.
Oh, okay. So this is a, oh yeah, so I'll enlarge my sketches and start adding more detail. And again, they're just super messy, and I'm really not trying to make anything perfect at this point, but I'll play around with size and scale, and eventually we'll come to the final art. And this is the piece that's in the show. And again, I love detail. I can't kind of help myself from adding more and more detail to books. And I work in pencil and watercolors, so it takes me a long time to do each piece also. I wish I could be faster, and every time I try to be faster, I mess things up. So I figure this is just the way I work. And so I'll build things up gradually over time. And I also like to, even though it's nonfiction, I like to kind of tell a story within the pictures itself, because I feel like that engages kids who are maybe pre-readers, and they can sort of look at different characters and, tell themselves stories about them too. And in this, I tell myself stories too as I'm composing the pictures. And so in this one, there's a lot of different horses doing different jobs, but there's this little boy over to the right-hand side carrying yellow flowers, approaching the little girl, and she's looking lovingly at horses down in the distance. So I kind of entertain myself that way. And I think a lot of illustrators do that. They like to add little, secret things in there for kids to find. Yeah, that's basically how I work. And yeah, I kind of do things all on one layer. So I've got the sidebar over to the left with a little information about horse manure in the cities, which was a huge problem back then. And yeah, so again, I just try to make it rich with different layers of information between the words and the illustrations. And yeah, that's kind of how I work.
And Jennifer, we have a question about writing nonfiction. Where did you do your research? You include so much information. How did you decide what facts to include and what to omit?
Yeah, that's always what keeps me up at night, because there's especially with a book like this that covers a huge span of history, and I'm writing a little bit about a lot of things. So when I'm reading and researching, I just take notes and kind of do a brain dump of everything that I've learned until it sort of starts to form a narrative in my head. And again, it's hard to put it into words, but when I can sort of see it play like a movie in my head, then I kind of know that I have something. And again, even with nonfiction, you've got a story arc with nonfiction, just like with fiction. And so you want, you want excitement, you want to build up to excitement, you want the reader to turn the page, and you want surprises. So that all kind of, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that all kind of feeds into what I decide to put into the book and what not. So yeah, but I always, it's like that iceberg metaphor, everything that I didn't put in there is like hidden below the surface, and only a fraction of it gets put into the book. But that's the challenge and the joy of doing these kind of books, to me at least. It's like a giant puzzle.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer and Gianna and Ruth, for sharing all of these. It's just so wonderful to see. I think, we want to have some time for our guests to come in and ask questions of all of you as well. But we also realize you might have questions for each other. I know as we were kind of all connecting before the webinar started, there were some similarities that you were realizing, and even now, Gianna, you were talking about that cinematic quality, and Jennifer, you were just talking about, how the story starts to become a movie playing in your head. As we listen to each other, do you have questions that are kind of coming up to the surface that you'd like to pose?
I actually want to ask to both of you. I have so much admiration for both of you doing nonfiction, because I can't imagine one weaving through all of that information, and then also the fact checking, like Ruth, your thing of discovering that you have the wrong sort of the wrong setting. And how do you navigate through that? It just seems like it's daunting in a way to have this past that you, like you said, there's not so much photo reference of it. And or Jennifer, for you, like just so much information, you're like, how do I pull enough of this out to make it tell its story? But I mean, that just seems like it's amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, doing a biography was extremely daunting. But luckily, Rosa Bonheur was famous in her own time. She was so famous they made a doll, a Rosa Bonheur doll. So there was actually a lot written about her, and she actually dictated an autobiography. So I was able to get that. And there was another biography written about her. So there was a lot of information, actually written information about her process that was extremely helpful, and about her childhood and growing up, and little anecdotes about how she got kicked out of school for squashing the headmistress's flowers with a wooden sword. So yeah, I think nonfiction is challenging. I'm not sure I'm ready to do another one, frankly, right away. And I give Jennifer a huge amount of credit, yeah, for doing nonfiction. It's very impressive.
Yeah, it's funny because I've had this conversation with people about nonfiction versus fiction, and to me, fiction is so much harder because you're inventing something completely out of nothing. And whereas, with nonfiction, I've got all the ingredients. I just need to sort of mold them, meld them together. And so maybe it's just the way my brain works. And I mean, I love learning new things, so I always feel like a lot of the books I do, it's more because I want to learn more about a certain subject. And I feel like I'm a perpetual student. So I really love it. So maybe that's what keeps me going with it. But it definitely is challenging. And I worry, am I getting things wrong? And, but, you just check and recheck again your work, and I work with a great team. And yeah, so it's a challenge. Any sleepless nights again, but
So I have a question. So Gianna, you have a horse. Jennifer, you never ended up being.
I never had a horse of my own, but I rode many horses. And
so, Gianna, do you still have a horse?
I do, yes.
Certainly.
Yeah. And you as well?
I did up until a couple years ago. My last boy passed away, but he was 34, and we bought him when he was 5. So we had almost 30 years.
What kind was he?
He was a quarter horse. He was pure white at toward the end. Started out as a gray.
Yeah.
And he was actually my unicorn model. I also do a lot of fantasy art, and I did a series of collector's plates and used him as my unicorn model. He actually looked more like an Arabian. He had a really dishy, cute face.
Yeah.
Everyone thought he was an Arabian.
Wow, that's a good age too.
Yeah. And what kind of horse do you have?
At the moment, I have a Mustang,
Ooh.
who is I some days love him and some days he's Dennis the Menace and I want to put him in the wood chipper. I'm only kidding.
What color?
Yeah, but I have him. And I've got a little tiny mule that is his buddy. And they're not a great team, only Goose is the Mustang is a bit of a boss, and little Muggsy the mule's older and he's sort of like, ugh, leave me alone, but they're figuring it out.
Have either of you ever had the chance to ride an Icelandic horses?
No, but I've heard they're amazing.
They're amazing. I did when I was younger, maybe a teenager, and I mean, they're
Oh.
small, but they can carry, full-size adult, and they have different gaits. Like they have the tolt, which is like a running walk. And I love the idea of riding one now because there's not as far to fall.
Yes.
I won't get hurt.
Good point.
But there's an Icelandic horse farm in Vermont somewhere that I really would like to visit.
Mm.
That's interesting. I just met a woman she breeds Icelandic horses right here in Colorado, in southern Colorado, and I can't wait to go meet them because I've sort of seen them here and there on the trails and whatnot. And I've always been intrigued by them because they just seem like they're just hardy little guys, and and very personable, the ones I've met. So I'm curious to get to know them a little better.
We have a couple questions in the chat, and Angela, you going back to the question of nonfiction, fiction, have you noticed, do kids have a preference, fiction or nonfiction?
I don't know. I mean, I guess they're different markets, schools and libraries tend to use the nonfiction more maybe, but it's hard to say. I think there are a lot of kids who love nonfiction, a lot of kids who are interested in facts about things, but it's hard to say what they love more.
We also have, and I just, Lyle has shared this beautiful question and comment. Earlier in the conversation, Jennifer said drawing something is a way to love it. What a beautiful statement. I never thought about art making as a practice of love, but what a beautiful notion. Another reason art is fundamental to the human experience. As an artist myself, I'm wondering what all of you think about the role of art in contemporary society.
Wow. Well, I mean, the history of art evolving as does our politics and our weather and our world, like it is really interesting, the different aspects of it. And I love that, going back to loving what you're, well, I don't remember exactly how it says, but essentially learning to love what you're drawing, or you're drawing because something that you love. And that like art is such a personal expression and carried through so many things, from graffiti to these little thumbnails we do to these beautiful giant paintings. And yeah, that's a good statement and question. Thank you for that.
And I think, I'm just thinking of doing school visits and talking to kids about art, and, there's no right or wrong way to do it. And that's the beauty of it. It's the process of it. And I think that's to be encouraged in kids, and maybe more adults too. I think maybe the world would be a better place if everybody took up an art just for the fun of it and the love of it, and not so much the end result. I mean, we have the pressure of having to have an end result, but really it's the process, I think, that keeps many of us coming back to it. That's just my take on it.
I think it's important to be creative in your life, whether it be, making quilts or any kind of art or craft. I don't know. I think it's good for us. It just pulls us out of ourselves and into a different place, really. You get into a zone that's I don't know, it's more peaceful, shall we say, than the world at large, and it's a great place to be, and to experience creativity is really a gift.
As our time is wrapping up, we have one final question. If it's possible, if you can give us a sneak peek, or share with us what you're working on now, might it include horses?
Gee, Oh, I didn't prepare that. I'm actually working on a completely different style for a board book series. And it is Good Morning Farm Animals and Good Night Farm Animals. And it's children imitating the movements and sounds of animals. And it's really fun. And I'm inventing a new style in gouache with simpler characters, not completely cartoony, but a lot simpler than I normally work. And yes, there's a little foal prancing in there. So there will be horses.
I have a few things that I'm working on that I can't quite talk about yet because they're in very, very early stages and I have to figure them out myself first. But I did recently finish up art for a book called The Wolf Effect, which will be out next spring. And it's a book that I illustrated but didn't write. And it's been a while since I've illustrated somebody else's work, but it was such a joy to work on. And it's about it's a nonfiction book about the repopulation of wolves to Yellowstone National Park. And it was relaxing because I didn't have to write it too, so it was like
have that focus on the art.
just focus on the art, yeah. So it was really, really fun.
That must have been really neat. They just reintroduced or are reintroducing wolves into Colorado now too.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it, but
Yeah, I really didn't know much about it at all, but you know, just from working on the book, you learn, and it's exciting.
yeah.
Cool.
I'm actually working on another horse story now, and it's I wrote it and I'm illustrating it. It's inspired by a Mary Oliver poem, which I am completely spacing on the name of it right now, which is terribly embarrassing. Anyway, here's one of my little swatches. Kind of, it's going to be in this sort of realm. You can totally see that.
Oh,
It's kind of messy, but it's an elder horse, whether it's a mama or a grandma or a papa or who knows, asking the baby horse how it will spend this beautiful day, essentially. So,
that's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you, Jennifer, Gianna, Ruth, for connecting with us today and sharing your work, your love of horses, your process with us. We're always just love to hear that from you. For all of our guests tuning in, this has been recorded, so we'll put this on our YouTube channel very soon. If you can come to see the exhibition, it's open until December 31st. Please visit carlmuseum.org. Our fantastic shop has Jennifer and Gianna and Ruth's books available in the shop. And you can also check out our events page to see what's coming up. We'll have some more on-site as well as virtual programs that we hope you can join us for. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
thank you.
Thank you.